Morning, everyone. Chodesh Tov. Today I'm continuing to learn the first two prakim of Mishna D'mai for the uplift of the soul of Lea Yocheved Bat Avraham Sarah. Shal Chala Olama. By the way, if you're interested in also joining on the collective Siyum Shas that some of us are doing in Leah's memory, you should leave a comment or reach out to me via email or Instagram or whatever. If you want to learn some Mishnas yourself, we are trying to get all of the Mishnah collectively learned in her honor by September 9th, which will be the end of her Shloshim. And there's some Mishnayot that no one is learning right now. So if you have the capacity to learn some Mishnahs for her, let me know. I will connect you. Okay. So just a little bit of review from yesterday. And by the way, if you're ever watching in the future, and you're watching live, you can comment in the chat and I will see it right here and I can respond. That's why I put the chat in the video, so that I can see it and talk to you. Okay, so yesterday we had Mishnah 3, which was, it says here when we don't worry about D'mai, but I would describe not worrying about D'mai. That would probably be the language of like Mekel or Kalin, which was the first Mishnah. I would say when D'mai is not applicable. When the stringency of D'mai does not apply, it does not apply when we get these four kinds of things, when we're acquiring produce for non-human consumption, or from a place where Maasrot are not applicable for some reason, like everywhere that's not Eretz Yisrael, which is why we're not worried about D'mai today in general, unless we are living in Eretz Yisrael and we're Jewish, or circumstantial confirmation of tithing. What does that mean? When the produce that we're getting we know that it has been tithed because of the circumstances under which we get it. And 4, if you acquire it for anointing, there's machloket Beit Shammai Beit Hillel, but we'd follow Beit Hillel. So if you acquire produce for anointing, then that's like acquiring it for drinking, because your skin drinks it up. As we know, those of us who moisturize every day, your skin drinks up the oil, so that is like acquiring for human consumption. That's Mishnah 3. Okay, Mishnah 4. And Mishnah 4 is the last Mishnah in the parak. So we'll do a little bit of review of the whole parak at the end. Very exciting. Okay, Hadmai. Me'arvin bo, u'mishtatfin bo, u'mevarchin alav, u'mezamnin alav, u'mafrishin oto. Bring my mic a little closer. U'mafrishin oto arom bein hashmashot. So, D'mai, we make an eruv with it, and we make an Ali partnership. That's Dr. Josh Kolb's translation. We make an Ali partnership with it, and we bless over it, and we do Birkat Hamazon over it, and we can tithe from it naked or at twilight on Shabbos, or twilight before Shabbos. I just don't. Okay, so this is all stuff that you could not do with Tevel. Stop it. Okay. All right. Stuff you couldn't do with Tevel. Tevel is untithed produce. The Oraita, we are forbidden from eating it. in addition to other things that we're permitted from doing. So there's stuff you couldn't do with tevel that you can do with D'mai. D'mai that you didn't tithe yourself. So even if you get this D'mai and you didn't do the stringent, potentially second tithing from it yourself, even if you didn't do that, you still don't treat it as if it's fully tevel, because you can do all this stuff with it that we couldn't do with full-on tevel forbidden produce. You can make an eruv with it, which that's not the kind of eruv that's like a string. But what was at the time the more common kind of eruv, which was you would like cook something, you would like start cooking something, and that would cover the people in your courtyard or in your area. This still happens. So you can carry stuff across the courtyard between other people's houses. That's called Eruv Tanchumin, I think. I mean, I know that's what it's called. I am not 100% sure I described it correctly. So, anyway, you can do that with tevel. You can make a food. You can make Eruv Tanchumin with D'mai, not with tevel. And you can make this kind of alley partnership, which is like it's like an eruv, apparently. Like it allows you to like go through alleyways between courtyards in terms of carrying on Shabbos. Umevarchin alav. So if Rambam explains that this means if you eat D'mai produce, you are obligated to say Birkat Hamazon over it at the end. And there's other opinions about what this means. Rashi thinks that it means you bless hamotzi before you eat it, which in general implies that you should be eating it, that it's not tevel, because if you're saying a bracha, then we're pretty stringent about not saying brachot in vain, and especially over something you're dafka not allowed to do. So if you're saying a bracha over D'mai, that's a big statement that you think it's legitimate that you're consuming it, even if you didn't tithe it yourself. Alav, which means, if you ate bread from D'mai with 3+ adult humans, then you would say Birkat Hamazon with a zimun, and that would also apply for D'mai. Umafrishino to arom, and you can separate the tithes from it naked. Dr. Josh Kolp explains. Normally you would not separate tithes from produce naked because separating tithes is something that requires a bracha, and a bracha is not something we say naked, apparently. So the fact that you can separate tithes from D'mai produce naked means that you don't say a bracha, which means that because there's a doubt about whether it's been tithed already. So separating from it naked is a way, I guess, of saying that you don't say the bracha, and like you really don't need to say the bracha. And you can also separate tithes from D'mai Bein Hashmashot, which is like twilight before Shabbos comes in, where we're in Safek, we're in doubt about whether it's Shabbos or not. And so since we have the Safek D'mai and the Safek Shabbos, then it's fine to do this separation that in any case doesn't require a blessing. And all of these things are kind of points in favor of that we trust to some degree Amei Haaretz to have taken tithes from this produce. It's not like we're totally like throwing them out and disregarding them as like potential actors in good faith. there's actually a lot of major things we can do with my produce that we didn't tithe ourselves because we, on some level, are kind of trusting the Amei Haaretz to do it, and we acknowledge that in the way that we treat D'mai produce. I think that's very nice. Okay. So in general, you have to take Maaser Rishon for the Levim before you take Maaser Sheni for yourself for the festivals. But here, if you took Maaser Sheni before you took Maaser Rishon, it doesn't matter. Meaning that Maaser Sheni that you took would still, from the D'mai produce, would still be valid. To, as Kati explains, to claim as, to make a vidui over, which I think means to like claim as Maaser Sheni produce at a festival. I didn't read it that carefully. But in either way, to me, the point seems to be like, this is something you're not supposed to do with, if you're tithing from Tevel produce, to make it non-Tevel produce. But if you're tithing from D'mai produce, you can mix up the order a little bit. It doesn't matter, which again points to, we are assuming that it has been tithed properly, kind of. There's some amount of safek, but we're like confident enough that it's been done that we're willing to play, that we're willing to have a little bit of flexibility with the order that you can do things in, which normally we'd be strict about. Okay, and then shemen hagardi sach be'etzbaotav, the oil that a weaver anoints their fingers in so that their fingers don't get like cut by, or damaged otherwise, or like they get blisters, I guess, from weaving the threads. Chayav b'dmai. That oil is subject to the rules of D'mai, meaning it's oil that you acquire for anointing, which, as we saw in the previous Mishnah, is considered for human consumption, which means you have to, it's not patur from D'mai, it's you're chayav b'dmai. The rules of D'mai apply to it, including everything we just said above. This Mishnah. V'hasorik notein batsamer patur min hadmai. And the wool, sorry, I don't fully remember what this was. I know I can't check, but because I closed the tab. But it's not a wool spin, a wool comber, someone who combs wool, which is a step in the process of processing raw wool into threads. A wool comber who puts this on the wool, that oil is patur min hadmai, is exempt from D'mai, because it's like using oil to anoint kalim, which, as we saw, vessels, which, as we saw in the previous Mishnah, that is exempt from D'mai. So it seems to me like this statement, like this doesn't really fit with the rest of the Mishnah. It seems like it belongs in the third Mishnah, but it's here. So that's something I'm going to have to deal with in figuring out like the broader structure. But it seems like these two are about like, in what ways do we consider D'mai produce as actually kind of having been legitimately tithed by Amei Haaretz? Recalling that the whole point of the category is that we don't think that the Amei Haaretz are necessarily tithing, but there's major ways in which this D'mai produce is, we do treat it as if the Amei Haaretz have tithed it properly, as from the standpoint of our practice. And then there's these things which seem to be kind of being like choser on Mishnah 3, in terms of like a detail of whether something is like for sikha, or for kalim, whether something is for anointing yourself or for anointing vessels. So I'm going to type that question. Type that question in here. Why is the last part here about anointing in this Mishnah and not the previous one? Otherwise, this Mishnah is about ways in which we treat my produce as if it has already been tithed properly. There we go. All right. And that with that, we've learned the whole first we've learned the whole first parak of Mishna D'mai. Yay! 4 Mishnayot, mostly all about like the boundaries of the suffix that we're holding with D'mai. It's not. They definitely didn't. It's not Amehar. It's definitely didn't tithe this stuff. We don't trust them at all. And it's not, Ameharetz are like Nemanim to take Ma'asrot. It's like a true suffix, and it falls different. It falls like on different sides of the spectrum, in like variably depending on case, and like, but mostly it's about like the first Mishnah and the fourth Mishnah. If we ignore the thing about Shemen, the first Mishnah and the fourth Mishnah are about when do we basically treat D'mai as if it has been tithed properly. Like, when are we mekel about it? And like, in what ways is D'mai just mamish, like the way we like tithed, like fully tithed produce? And then Mishnah Bet. Mishnah Bet is largely about ways that D'mai is like, no. This is also largely ways that we treat D'mai as if it's already been tithed, and the tithe that we are taking from it doesn't actually need to be happening. And Mishnah Gimel is like largely what is up with this? Things that are just fully patur from D'mai, which is I'm a little bit actually still confused about this phrasing, because from my very limited understanding, it seems like all this stuff you would just be like it wouldn't just be exempt from D'mai, it would just fully be exempt from Ma'asrot, like Lechatchila. So I'm actually going to look that up. The chat is going to go away for a second. If you're interested, I'm looking this up on Sefaria, and the thing I'm doing to look it up is I'm looking at Dr. Joshua Kolb's English explanation of the Mishnah. Okay, this Mishnah teaches that the rules of D'mai apply only to cases where we need not separate out times. So it seems to be implied that if you buy produce for a non-food purpose, that from someone who's a chaver, you do trust to separate tithes, then that is something that you would need to tithe, that chaver would need to tithe from. Which I guess makes a certain amount of sense, because when you're buying food, when you're buying produce from someone, they don't necessarily know what you're gonna use it for. So a chaver would tithe the produce no matter what, because it could be used for food, and they wouldn't want someone to be eating tevel, untithed tevel produce by accident. They would be strict about that. But if an Am Haaretz is selling you produce, and we're already kind of questioning whether we're already in a state of safek about whether an Am Haaretz would be tithing produce meant for human consumption or not, and I kind of lost my train of thought. A chaver, we're gonna assume tithes the produce no matter what. On Haaretz, we're not sure. So this Mishnah is just coming to clarify that you don't need to take tithes from these things. It still doesn't quite make sense to me. Okay, I guess I just don't know enough about the laws of when Maaser applies to be able to understand whether Mishnah Gimel is presenting a way in which D'mai produce is different from normal properly tithed produce, or whether it's functioning as if it's been properly tithed already. If it is functioning as a way in which D'mai produce is different from properly tithed produce, which might not even be the right question, then it would be an exception among these four Mishnayot, which are pretty much all about ways in which D'mai produce we treat as if it has been tithed already, more or less, which is a very interesting way to begin a masechet about a category that only exists because we don't think they're tithing it properly. It starts being like, okay, we don't think they're tithing properly, but here are all the ways you should treat it as if it's tithed properly. Love it. Okay, so tomorrow we'll be starting Perek Sheni of Masechet D'mai, which will take us through 5 Mishnayot up to the end of the week. I will see you all then. And once again, this learning is Leilui Nishmat Lea Yocheved Bat Avraham Besara. And in general, the learning at Torah, the Tiferet Torah, is sponsored in memory of these beloved neshamas. I'll see y'all tomorrow.